Alright, we're up.
We can't start. We can't start.
We don't have a quorum yet. We gotta wait a minute.
I'll have to make some more noise with this if you don't mind.
Where's the microphone?
Just tear it open.
Opening it.
Just tear it open.
It's getting
Okay, Steve's here.
Well, just for a second.
Okay,
Please excuse me for just one moment, I shall return. Hold on one second. Actually, why don't we go ahead and start now?
okay. Welcome to our work meeting. This comes work meeting for Wednesday, the 22nd. We're going to start a review of this evening's agenda. I did have a request to move, just looking at this with boy stuff and other issues, we're gonna move 2.5. Anthony, are you okay if we move 2.5 to the front? Sure. Or we can get you out of here and your family, does that work? Everybody else has to stay, Trevor, they need to be right after that. But that would get you out of here. Any concerns about that? Okay. So 2.5. Any other changes, concerns about? Okay.
Let me check, hold on. I just wanted to make sure that MOU was removed, it was. That was an accident, so.
Okay. 1.2, any future agenda items?
Just what we talked about as far as, I don't know what the schedule is as far as needing, I think we need a work meeting to discuss all the things that have been being talked about in these meetings we're having.
The athletic complex.
Yeah.
I was thinking about doing a special work meeting. I don't know how you guys feel about that, because it's a big complex project.
Yeah, I just know that it.
Yeah, I don't
we can
think
make
there'd be
sure
enough time in a meeting like this with everything else.
We just need to be digesting that, I think, before we go too far down the road without really understanding. We can.
January 29th was going to be the joint meeting. We could replace that with.
I can't be there 29th.
Okay. We'll try it. I don't know. You let us know. Maybe.
Special work meetings.
Yeah. We can do a poll, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. 1.3, council discussion of future citizen recognitions. We have one tonight for the trails. And then anything else, did we get anything else, Jackie, you see? Okay.
Can I go back to one more time? And on that, I really, there was some comments made and things last night that just want to make sure people don't think you're gonna get $26 million in revenue.
Oh, I think I heard that too.
And I think that left an opinion that people are like, oh, $26 million. Well, and it's
no,
not $26 million,
$26 million.
it's, that's taxable revenue, we only get a portion of that tax, and so I would just
It's
really
also
like.
regional.
Exactly, I would just really like to see it just better, and I know we did that study and things like that, and it's all hypothetical, but just some good data that night to really understand that component of it too.
So Nathan and I talked about it, if we wanna proceed down this path, then we can have to update the study, we just didn't wanna spend the money on
Yeah,
it until
20
we really
grand,
knew
yeah.
we were proceeding.
Great.
So
Well, it's
they're
part
ready
of-
to go whenever
It's
you
part
are.
of my text to some of you today.
Right.
Some of those things we don't want to, it's the right way to put this. We still need to hold some cards close to our vest as we're negotiating,
Sure.
right? If this is too good for us to pass up, right? I don't want to be
Right.
put in that spot either, so I think we need to have discussion of what realistic numbers are and sources and timing, et cetera, for our negotiations, and talk about what we feel good about broadcasting to the public, including the parties we're negotiating with.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, but we are having neighborhood meetings and we are telling them that we're gonna have this, they have this feeling that we're gonna have a windfall of money that's gonna help with all these things. And so then we have to eliminate that conversation from them if we're having that, cause I don't wanna,
I'm
I don't
not
wanna
saying don't
mislead
give
them
them,
either
I'm
way.
saying we need to talk about the
And-
specifics of that
Understand.
information and what to.
Bring to the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we're also showing conceptual drawings that nobody's invested money into, and it's kind of an art paint on canvas, really quickly done for the modeling of the Walker property or even the other areas, like boxes and square buildings, that's not what it's gonna look like, even if it does go that density, or even the soccer fields, it's not gonna be all soccer, I mean, it's just programmable.
How many
square
times
thing.
did I have to explain? We're
Agreed.
just drawing lines so you can
Yeah.
get an idea, that's what a concept is.
And so they see the space and the fill and the size of it, and so I think there's a lot of maybe more articulating through messaging, I don't know who or how we can get that across.
Right,
So we can send out a doodle poll, I think this is all great stuff.
yeah,
Maybe email us we've got a list of this, but if there are certain things that council wants to talk about in that meeting, we can get it, we'll just get it on the agenda to discuss, make sure we have some, the
It's a-
answers we can get.
yeah, it's just important because it's like if you look in that area, this will replace the regional park, and when people think park, they don't think athletic programmable fields, they think a place to go and play and recreate. And so it's like we're gonna have to figure that component of it too.
Sounds good. Okay, well, we will jump to 2.5, so we'll move to 2.5.
Mr. Mayor, first due to some complications, I need to recuse myself from this. So I'll step out, and then when we move back to 2.1, I'll come back.
All right, well, good evening. This is something I've been wanting to discuss here for a little while. That is bringing our fertilization services that we contract out in-house potentially. So that's the question here tonight, is whether we want to do that or keep it contracted out. Just to give you an idea, this is the manicured area that we maintain. So this is our lawn and our meadow grass that we maintain. We have just under 8 million square feet that we mow and we fertilize. So spread throughout the city, various locations between park strips and large grass areas. So that's roughly 180 acres. That's almost 8 million square feet. So for our fertilization program, we typically make 4 applications throughout the year. One in the early spring, one later spring, one in the middle of the summer, and then one later in the fall. Since I've taken over in the Parks Department in 2018, I've seen our contracted services go up 67%. So the price of this contracted service is skyrocketed, while our acres only increased 50%.
That's crazy
right?
stat, huh?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the product itself that they're applying. It's gone up a lot, but I think there's still a lot of overhead in there, and there's some room to save some money by cutting out a contractor potentially. And then in recent years, we've had to maintain a lot of oversight over the contractors, making sure that they are hitting all the areas that they say they're hitting. That we're getting the fertilization where they say they're putting it down, and it's a lot of babysitting on our end that is pretty frustrating. If they're not communicating well with us, or we're having to send our park staff out to look in the grass, see if they can see the fertilization, look at the weeds, see if they're curling up, and it's just a lot of babysitting, and it's taking a lot of our staff time to oversee that. So a lot more than I feel like it should.
For the premium cost, yeah.
Right. So list of pros and cons. I feel like the pros heavily outweigh the cons in bringing this service in-house. I think we'll have increased control over the product that we put down, the pricing that we're getting on, well, to an extent, the pricing, we can go out and shop a little bit more, the product that we're putting down. We'll know how much product we're putting down versus if it's with a contractor. I never know what their machines are calibrated at, if they're going at the bare minimum. Without going out and calibrating their equipment and their machines, we just don't know if they're actually putting down what we expect them to put down. It's another thing we just don't know. So I think we'll see an increased quality in our park spaces. I think we'll see less weeds, hopefully greener, lusher grass. I think we'll have more. We will have more flexibility with the timing of our applications, which will help a lot. We're not going to be bound by a contractor who has other contracts they have to service. We can do this when our weather windows permit us. So I think that's a huge benefit. I think there's potential for cost savings. And then for me, one of the biggest benefits and one of the main reasons I wanted to do this is it would add another full-time employee to the Parks Department. I only anticipate this person, if we were able to hire this person to fill this position, would work about 6 months out of the year overseeing the fertilization and weed spraying program. So they start probably in, depending on the weather, late March, early April, would roll into September, October timeframe. The other months of the year, we could have them out assisting our arborists, we could have them helping with playground repairs, a lot of other areas they could be helping out with. So we could desperately use the help of the department. If you are looking at the cons, we do assume some liability. If we're out spraying and we're spraying in the wind and we drift some of our pesticides and chemicals into a neighboring property, obviously we would be liable for that. And then we would obviously have training and equipment costs. I mean, that's just inherent with the job, I guess. We do currently own all the equipment that we would need to do these applications. It's equipment we've had sitting around for quite a while. We don't use it very often. Every once in a while, we'll use it, pull it out and use it, but it would be good to put this equipment to use because we already own it. So as far as the budget's concerned, next year we have $144,000 budgeted for the contracted services. Yeah, I think if we bring the services in-house, we're gonna be about the same right now on our costs between a full-time employee at roughly $88,000 if we're paying a family insurance plan, and then roughly $55,000 for the material that we'd be putting down throughout the year. So it's sixes when you're looking at it here. I think the more we grow, the more we put out, there's more potential for cost savings.
I assume that you didn't calculate in here though the costs associated with babysitting?
No, and that wasn't factored into this number.
So that's a soft cost that might
It's already-
be, that might be realized also as
Yep.
savings, right?
And I anticipate we'll be able to do 95% of this fertilization with a single employee. There may be some times where it makes sense to bring in another employee to help that person out. If they're spraying bark strips out of a truck or something, have one person drive, have the other person walk behind and spray. But I think 95% of the time, a single employee would be able to handle this.
Have you factored in O&M or upkeep on the mowers and equipment?
It's not factored in these numbers. It's very minimal, the upkeep on our equipment that we have. It's maybe replace a pump diaphragm once a season.
Fuel, oil, all that.
Fuel, oil, all that, yeah. If you have a motor, maybe a motor goes out on a sprayer, maybe a couple $100 to replace it. But I think that's all very minimal, and since we already own the equipment and are upkeeping it anyways, and we're using that equipment for other purposes throughout the year,
Right.
I just think it makes sense to put that.
When did we switch to third party on this?
As far as I know, we've always had a third-party
On
contracting.
all of the open fields or grass?
So now this is
Or
just
select areas?
the groomed areas.
Right.
So this is not the open space or
Right.
the, adjacent to the trailways, anything like that. We would still, do that with our trails department. They would continue operating that. This is just our manicured spaces, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess a couple alternatives, if you wanted to consider it, we could stay with contractor, or we could do a hybrid approach. I don't necessarily see that working out very well. I feel like we should either go all in or not. And the reason I guess we're bringing this to you is because it would require an amendment to the budget, correct, Kyle?
And the staffing plan.
Staffing plan. So if we decide to go forward with this, we should probably just bring that back to you on the consent agenda next time. But open any questions or any thoughts or feedback now.
Do we have a potential person in mind or job description? I mean, it's pretty unique. Specific, yeah, for.
I don't necessarily have anybody in mind right now. I'd like to hire somebody with at least a pesticide applicator's license, so we didn't have to do that training. If we did have to do the training after we hired them, it's not the end of the world. It's not too hard, and it's something that we could train somebody up in-house if we had the right applicant, somebody that was willing to learn. And
Little landscape guys out there would love a steady
Yeah.
paycheck.
And we've just got done with, a round of interviews for a different position, that we're trying to backfill, and we had a lot of great applicants in that pool that could potentially fill this position as well.
Have we ever done an RFP for this? Are we shopped for lower cost services?
I haven't put an RFP out. I'm constantly having contractors reach out to us to give us bids, and I'll have them send in bids, with this and mowing. Every time their bids that are coming in are probably double what we're paying right now. That's with mowing and this service. So we could put out an RFP and see what came in, see if it was worth it. But again, to me, one of the biggest benefits was acquiring another full-time employee.
That's what sends the spidey hairs on the back of my neck. Right? More people, it's always more cost, especially
Perpetual
with
cost, yeah.
payroll burden
Yeah.
compounding over time. I'm not opposed to it, but that's always the first thing is people cost way more, which is usually why you contract with these sorts of things. So I was just curious if we've ever actually looked at
It was a thought.
competitive
We haven't
bids from others.
We haven't put it out to an RFP. Like I said, I've gathered quotes independently, and I've talked to other cities who face the same challenges. I've talked with them, other managers, to see what they're paying. And they are their costs that they're paying are significantly higher than what we're paying right now. And then I think
For contracting.
for contracted services, yes. The trend that we've seen with our costs increasing, I think again, my personal opinion, I think you're better bringing this one in-house at this time. I see your concern. for
Both of
sure.
those are all just questions, right?
Yep.
Would we get the same level of service? Can one employee mow that much of field?
They're not mowing.
Oh,
Not
This is
mowing,
just
fertilizing.
fertilizer.
Just
Just
fertilizer, okay,
fertilizing.
oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry if I didn't.
No, I
It's just-
assumed, sorry, so.
My hope is we'll have a better service, better quality.
Okay.
I think one person, if this is all they're working on for that 6-month
That
block,
makes a lot more sense to me. In my
they
head, I was like,
they'll be able to, like I said, they'll be in the city already. They're not gonna be traveling from outside of another city. They'll have all the resources here in town. They'll be able to, I think they'll be able to be a lot more efficient.
okay, awesome.
I like it, cause you're really only paying half of an employee to do, cause you're getting 6 months of the year of
6 to 8 months.
of free, basically free labor above and beyond what the contract is.
And like I said, we could desperately use that employee in other sectors for the remainder of the year.
My guess, those costs would go up, the contracted costs would go up too, just like
And that's the trend we're seeing
employee,
with
yeah.
everything, right? Everything is continuing to climb. 67%, it's gone up since 2018, and I don't know that it's gonna come back down anytime soon.
We talked about a lot of times finding that, at that
That
point, where the
break-even
tipping,
point, right?
yeah, and I think it
Right.
feels like we've gotten there to me.
And I think it's the same thing with anything, we're making a change this year, next year come back with a report that shows, here was the cost, here's what was associated with it, here's what we did, and we have to reevaluate and make sure that these numbers really play out, that we didn't see, oh, we really can't do it at that cost, it costs us, quite a bit more, those kind of things, I just think, just to report back on that, it's just good practice.
Yeah, I think it'd be a different conversation if we had to buy a truck and fertilizer and all the
Yeah, like.
auxiliary stuff for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're fully equipped for it right now. So in the future, there is one piece of specialized equipment I would like to potentially buy, but I think we'd like to try this out for a year or two, see how it goes. And then if we decide this is where we want to stay, then potentially look at that piece of equipment. It's about a $15,000 specialized piece of equipment.
Yeah, but that's cost saving over 3 years.
Yeah.
So yes, we're
You
good.
guys are good with
Move forward, bring the
moving
Budget
forward?
amendment back.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Okay. Thank you,
Who's
Anthony.
next?
Maybe we can do something about that 1.3 million partnerships. We're not-
Yeah,
We're working on.
yeah.
Okay, appreciate it, Anthony. Okay, we'll go bounce back to 2.1 then, Herriman Main Street, Herriman Road Boulevard, community update, Bryce.
Okay, so we, have talked about this multiple times, but we kind of have an update based on our community meeting that was held here at City Hall in December. So we kind of wanted to give you the update. We've done some further analysis since then and want to kind of present some options, get some thoughts and feedback from the council and kind of go a direction with this. So as we know, Herriman Rose Boulevard is just down the road here from City Hall, the next intersection down from Black Locust here. Background, we've discussed this a little bit, but we've relocated, and by we, the school, city, HPD, and the school district all discussed and came up with a new safe walk route for the school this school year, from crossing at Herriman Rose to crossing at Black Locust, which is this traffic signal right here. Since that time, we've gotten a lot of feedback in council meetings and through emails, and that the community wasn't super excited about that change and requested a traffic signal at that location that they used to cross at. And so, as you know, we did a traffic warrant study for that intersection, and it did not warrant a traffic signal at that time. And so part of the engineering recommendation was to not install a signal, but before we discussed full solutions, we wanted to understand the concerns of the community a little bit more before we proposed solutions to the council. So we held that community meeting on December 12th. There was pretty good attendance, and it was an open forum, really. We kind of gave the background similar to this on how we got to where we were today, and then kind of opened it up to a couple of tables to kind of work amongst themselves and come up with kind of their biggest concerns and maybe possible solutions that they would recommend. So with that said, the common theme and the biggest concern was Herriman Street as a corridor, not necessarily just at the intersection at Herriman Rose Boulevard, but the speeds on the road, the traffic volumes, the width of the road, and obviously some of the curves and alignment in the road caused the community to have some concerns on how safe it was and how walkable the area is here to cross over Main Street. But a big concern that came up was even just walking along Main Street, not necessarily a crossing, but just walking along on the sidewalk was a concern for the community. And that's why there's been some concern with moving the crosswalk, because they'd be walking on a sidewalk or an asphalt path adjacent to heavy traffic and higher speeds. So based on that, we kind of asked, and Nathan can fill in here, he helped facilitate some of the questions and the answers from them. But some of the suggestions that came from that meeting were to lower the speed limit on Main Street, to implement traffic calming or speed reduction measures, such as raised intersections. So those are kind of, the whole intersection is a raised platform. Then you kind of have the ramps coming to the intersection, radar speed signs, speed humps, crosswalk improvements, reduce school speed zones, moving, and this has been discussed before, but removing the traffic signal that's here at Black Locust and moving it over to Herriman Rose, and installing a pedestrian signal or a hawk or a pedestrian hybrid beacon at Herriman Rose Boulevard. So we kind of I listed them all, and I won't necessarily address every potential solution, but these are kind of the main things that were thrown out. And then in the staff report, there were notes from the meeting attached. Those were actually the tables coming up, the community tables coming up with their ideas. And so if you saw that as an attachment, that's where that came from. And so based on this, we kind of came up with some potential solutions and just wanted to kind of get some thoughts and direction that way. So to accomplish a lot of what was suggested of lower speed limit, traffic calming, and some of these larger projects to make the road itself more walkable requires more significant overhaul of Main Street. Right now, it is treated as an arterial road, meaning we have 5 lanes of traffic. It is a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is one of the main entrances or exits out and into the city. It does converge with 126. And so we did, to accomplish all of the things that we're asking, it would be kind of an overhaul of Herriman Main Street to accomplish everything that was asked. And that would be, we can't just change the speed limit. That won't change driver behavior. HPD would have to be out there 24/7 to just, if we just artificially tried to change behavior by changing the speed limit, people are gonna continue to drive what they've been trained to drive, which was 35. And without any way to really reduce the speed, it wouldn't be effective without enforcement all the time. And so if you can think a vision for this might be if there was interest, like Provo Center Street, if you've been down there, there's a signal every block, it's 20 miles per hour speed limit. There are businesses all along there, so they purposely treated the road to give more of the priority to a pedestrian rather than the vehicle traveling through the corridor. Now, there's pros and cons, right? Obviously, if we were to consider something like this, it would be very costly because we would need physical improvements, like a raised intersection at the intersection, some channeling of lanes, reducing lanes. And it really is taking the concerns of one area and not necessarily taking the input of the whole system or of the whole city. This would be a big undertaking, and we can explore that option, but we didn't necessarily go into full analysis of that option, but to kind of consider that and discuss whether that's an option we want to consider. There are pros and cons, like I said. It'll be more walkable, but most vehicles will now probably divert from Main Street because it is much slower. It is more prioritizing pedestrian over the traveling vehicle. And so you may have vehicles now kind of divert to 134th or 126th instead, or 118th. Or residential neighborhoods cutting through to avoid kind of the area. And the reason I say that is because most of these can't be implemented on the 35-mile-an-hour road. You can imagine those raised intersections. If someone is going the speed limit at 35 miles an hour, they're gonna get a little bit of a launch off those raised intersections if they have a green light. And so to incorporate and really implement the vision that was kind of given out, we would need to consider something even more significant than what we've analyzed at this point. And so I'll kind of pause there and maybe get some thoughts to that before I get into the rest of the analysis.
Right off the bat, I'm excited. I know we briefly discussed before the meeting, but I'm excited to see all of those things on your report, as a lot of the citizens and feedback we've gotten is we're not being listened to. This is the third or fourth meeting we've had with them, and seeing that we're actually looking at ideas and trying to improve that intersection, and going through those steps and processes, so thanks for that.
Yeah, and then I can jump into second option, which is kind of where we focus most of our attention, and then we can kind of come back if there's bigger ideas or bigger concerns we wanna look at.
Well, I remember the first meeting I walked into, one of the residents made a comment about they're cheap, right? This is all about trying to save money, right? The reality is, number one would be expensive, right? Number one would be very expensive.
Very expensive.
With all the needs drawn on the budget. But then listening to them, I think as it came out more, and Teddy, I think it became less about the actual crosswalk and more about this whole area, right? This
Yes.
whole area.
Yes, I would agree.
And if you were to step back and you're new to the area, you come to an area where you've got City Hall, you've got all these community assets together, split by an arterial road, right?
Right.
Which is, that's complicated, right?
Exactly.
Because this should be a more walkable area. You should be able to walk. It is what it is though, but we've gotta work with, that being said, we have to work with what we've got right now. We can't go back and fix that.
Or the control that we have, like, we didn't place, when we did help with the land across the street, but we didn't place the school where it was. We can't dictate where they build schools.
Right.
I guess I'm still struggling with the word walkable. I mean, I can walk from here over to the library, over to the rec center. There's a stoplight there, I can go push the button and walk across. So help me understand what you mean by that it's not walkable.
Well, there's,
I would, I'm just
The downtown
interpreting
library is
kind of what
surrounded
we've
by
heard.
35-mile-an-hour roads in every direction and way more traffic than
and
this is.
six lane
Yeah, I
crossings,
mean,
yeah.
and
I
Massive
guess that's my,
crossings
I
also,
just
but
have to
that's-
I
understand what
think
you
it's
mean.
a comfort level, right, that walking, at least I'm admittedly kind of projecting what I've heard from the community, is that the comfort level to walk adjacent on a sidewalk, although they're separated from the road, the comfort level to walk next to a 35-mile-an-hour road versus a 25-mile-an-hour road is probably significantly different in their mind.
Well, for sure, but it doesn't mean it's not, you're not walking in a neighborhood.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's like, those kind of facilities aren't located in the center of a neighborhood for a reason. And so, an elementary school may have been, but again, it wasn't where we placed the elementary school. And it is adjacent to some neighborhoods, just not other neighborhoods, and we don't create boundaries. I guess that's my problem with it, it's like walkable, and if you do this, okay, I drop kids off at Providence Hall, you think this is a nightmare? I almost run over kids every day, literally. And so it's like, so do we need to, so are we gonna spend that money at, it's not about the money, it's like, there, and there's an inherent risk of walking down the sidewalk, right? And, I don't know how we fix every single one of those problems. I don't disagree, we need to listen and try and address it, I'm just trying to understand what the expectation is, because to me, walkable is a much different definition to other people, because to me, this is very walkable, and I'd much rather go down to a light, push a button, and walk across knowing that the most people are trained to stop at a red light. My 3-year-old grandson, it's red, stop, it means stop. You know, I mean, forever, from little, you're trained to stop, those kind of things, so
Yeah.
just help me understand what you mean,
Well, I
it's
think
not
that-
walkable.
I think that's a moving target, right? Your walkable, my walkable is different than mom of a second grader walkable, and the fear and the risk, right? And I think that's where I wasn't at the meeting, the last one, I had other priorities, so there's a level of, we had an easy, more convenient, more walkable, it felt safer with the school zone, the lights, and the extra cross guards, and the no right hand, or no left hand turns out of the neighborhood. It felt safer for that 30 minutes where they had to interact. Now, they did a study, they did a survey, a poll, I don't know if it's definitely not scientific, or definitely to the level where we can take all the data and take it for the gospel, but a lot of it came back because they're driving more kids. We've driven every day this week and last week due to weather. Now, in the springtime, that's gonna change. But as driving through there, I've seen more kids cross at the top end or middle end of my neighborhood going across, running across 4 lanes, kids on bikes and scooters. Did they do that last year? Probably, maybe. I didn't witness it that much last year because I wasn't hyper-focused on this area.
Right.
So, you see those other interactions, and I don't know, even tonight coming home at 4:15 as I was running home, somebody comes across the beacon light, it's after school, no crossing guards, but it's a young child, either leaving the middle school or the elementary, and the people stopped, but it was still heavy traffic through there, so it's not safe, and we know that, we've identified that, and I think.
And it's not safer though, Chief, because perception, right?
No, the old,
I know, I'm
beacon,
just saying,
the
because
RPs.
it's my understanding that perhaps our crossing guards think it's safer where we're at now.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
And
tremendously,
they're the
yes.
ones doing it every day, so I'm asking, statistically, it seems like it is safer where it is now
I agree.
than even when they were comfortable with it a couple of years ago, but it's not even, it wasn't as safe, it's perception, right?
Yes, it's all, I personally believe it's perception, and it's kind of like, I use the taking, we gave them something that was a fix for a few years before this was built out, before Herriman Town Center was here, before a lot of that stuff was there. So they were used to it, comfortable with it, they were okay with the risks involved, because the risks weren't identified or put on black and white paper. We knew the inherent risk, and we were talking about it for years, until that moved away and we really identified those risks, then they're like, whoa. So that's my personal feel on that, and
So-
again,
Am I misinterpreting that this majority of the sentiment, obviously everybody has their own ideas, but the majority of the sentiment is they're more comfortable having children cross at the hawk signal in the middle of a block than they are walking along a street for 100 yards to go to a controlled crosswalk with zebra striping and crossing guards.
Well, it's almost 200 yards, so
Okay.
each way. I think there's a percentage of people that want a hawk signal, but again, they don't, the hawk signal out in front of Copper, that's still tough, and people don't obey that. You're supposed to stop, again, when you count it as a four-way stop with the red flashing. Nobody does. But maybe one car after, then you see cars going through because there's no kids. I don't think that makes that, especially here with the line of sight and the other issues we've identified with the stoplight. And every time I drive by, I look and I see how far I can see in the sun and the angles. No way that I'd be able to stop in time going 35 miles an hour to give them a red light if there's no traffic. If there's traffic, it's going slower anyways, and even if the crossing guards are out there, it's slower anyways. I just don't think that's gonna improve it.
One of the things that came up in the meeting was a perception that maybe by us moving it, we've made it less safe because they see kids walking. It was interesting because they said, well, our kids used to walk, now we drive. So they're driving, they're watching different things. We have always had kids just leave that school and wander through the parking lot of the rec center.
Yep.
Again, we can tell them where a safe walk route is. Whether they do it or not is not within our control. And I think now we have parents who are driving, who used to not drive, and saying, hey, I see this. It's always been that way. It's just maybe different kids doing it now, because the kids who live on this end, this is an easier walk than when they used to walk all the way down this road. Now this is a shorter walk for them, so.
Yeah, and or a second grader might not take it, but 3 years later, now they're in fifth grade, they might take a shortcut.
You betcha.
But it's the same concept of, I'm gonna go out and buy a new vehicle. I haven't seen the Dodge Caravan ever, but then I go out and look at it, shop it, I see them everywhere. And now we're hyper-focused in this, and we see every error that these kids are doing. People are still turning left out of the right-hand turn onlys in the school, and the parents are doing that. And these are the same parents that are coming and complaining about traffic issues when they can't obey simple right-hand onlys.
So, and I think what Bryce has are some less expensive things we could do fairly easy, like the feedback
Yeah.
signs, and then we can talk about if we wanna spend more.
Okay, so here's my question. What is the outcome that is desired? And then, are we just doing things to do things? Or are we doing things that are actually aligned with what their desires are? And are the desires frankly realistic? I don't know another way to say it, right? I mean, Manhattan is a walkable city. And you got 20 lanes of crazy people driving every direction whatsoever and you walk everywhere.
Nobody obeys
Todd's
the don't
answer.
walk
It
sign.
depends.
Wow.
Right.
It depends on who you ask and when you
Yeah,
ask.
yeah. Now, is this a busier street? Sure. But I mean, we have a really good crosswalk right here at a stoplight. I don't know how you say, well, what's safe? Should we have a 75-foot grass strip and put the kids, behind 19 houses so that they're not walking along a street? I mean, how do you make an arterial road more walkable than have a big wide paved strip and a big 5-foot grass strip plus a whole curb and gutter plus the thing before the traffic? I mean,
But it's the same issue at Black Ridge, same issue at Providence, same issue at Foothills is probably the only one we don't have, but you do have some people crossing the other, Oakleaf, you got issues crossing Main Street, you've got all kinds of, every school has a very similar issue.
Juniper Crest up there, I mean, that's the widest intersection in the city pretty much, man.
That's my only thing, I was saying, what's the objective, and
Walking
are we
across
ever
Mountain View to
gonna
Mountain
get
Ridge,
to
you know?
a solution, even after, 300,000, it's like, still $300,000, and is it gonna help us arrive at the solution?
Yeah, I think
That's what I don't understand is
what's the problem?
well,
Yeah.
no,
You
yeah,
say
I don't,
solution to what?
I think there's opinions about the problems, but I'm not yet understanding that there's a material problem other than, well, I don't like that.
Well, I can tell you what the problem was.
Yeah.
The problem was that was super unsafe.
Yeah,
And so we solved that problem by doing the best we could to make it safer and move that down here. We actually put another crossing guard online, so it is more expensive the way we have it routed than it was before. But at the end of the day, and I think you mentioned this, we're not in a game of playing Russian roulette with your kids.
Exactly.
So we moved him down here. It's not convenient necessarily for everybody. Some it's more convenient,
Yeah.
others it's a little less convenient, but as government, we can only offer you the safer way. Nothing's safe, nothing.
Yeah,
That's kind of where
So that was the problem, that was our
hopefully we
solution.
can go that direction. So number one, there's not a perfect solution for everybody, right? You're never gonna make everyone happy. Second is some of the comments I've seen in the emails of, we hope you listen to us. Well, there's, whether it's this or the athletic complex, whatever else. I can listen to you and I can ask questions and I can try to understand your perspective and where you're coming from. But if I ultimately disagree with you, that does not mean that I didn't listen to you, right? Ultimately, for me, where this rests, money's always a factor. We have to be, that's the realistic part, right? Realistically, what resources do we have to try to find the best solutions possible? But ultimately, what is the safest option we can realistically do? So I'm always devil's advocate, so put it in that direction. I think I said this last time we talked about this, and it's where I will stand on anything like this is, what's the safest option we can realistically do? I'm going to trust that assessment and go with that. The devil's advocate, what if scenario, with the attorney, right? We haven't had many of these recently, but when I first came into all of this, there was a couple of these scenarios of, all right, councils could be faced with decisions like this. The example used at that time was something very similar to this, right? We have all the data, we've done all of this, we're being told that the safest option is X. If we choose to do something different, we can, we're at liberty to do that. But if and when something bad happens, and we did something other than what we were told is the safest, I would have to think that there's a liability issue there for us as well, right? So there may be some preferences for other things and convenience and use whatever adjective you want, walkability, etc. But if we know this is the safest by all of those measurements that are widely accepted, and we choose to do something else and something inevitably bad happens, yeah, we have to rest with that as well, so.
And some of it's just feel good. The flashing signs, it's like, after a while, you don't look at them anymore. You might for the first few times, but you just don't. You become numb to those kinds of things because there's something you see every day. And it's like, again, it's not about safety of kids because I think we covered that. This argument isn't about we're not willing to spend the money to make sure kids are safe. Because I think we are. We hired an extra crossing guard. Re-examine this, but I see no reason to spend more money just to make it feel good when it doesn't accomplish anything besides just make somebody feel better about it.
In the school zone, I get more scared about those guys writing me a ticket rather than hitting a kid. Cause honestly, it's like, I gotta go 20, right? It's not cause I'm worried about hitting a kid, but it's worried about them getting a ticket, so.
Bryce, why don't you go through your stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of on that note, we looked at, okay, with the existing infrastructure, not a complete overhaul, what are things we could do within budgeted means today or this year? And then maybe a longer term kind of situation. So, it's supposed to show you all the options. This is the recommended option, so we'll jump to that one. For long-term, maybe not necessarily anything we could implement in the next year or two or even 3 years, that may be placed in the capital improvement plan and then compete with other projects, whether it rises to the top with other projects that are also in the capital improvement plan. So this is a little bit of a thought to address getting students or anyone, not just school students, across the intersection the safest way we could see possible. So,
And I would also say it's to eliminate the most dangerous vehicular movements.
I was just gonna say,
Yes.
I tried to come out of it the other day when they were doing all
So-
that mess over there.
exactly.
And it's like, it's gonna be necessary at some point for vehiculars, not
Yes, so, and in this case, the vehicle movements that are most, risky there at the intersection today are also the ones that put the pedestrian at the most risk, which is the left turns out of Herriman Rose and the right turns out of kind of the access point. So with that in mind, we tried to address how could you eliminate a little bit of that risk and create a little bit of a simpler system. Now, it might not look simple because we're showing kind of a lot of infrastructure here, but essentially one of the big concerns with all of Main Street, not just this intersection, is that our left turns are offset in the wrong direction. So the opposite left turner is in your sight to see the oncoming traffic. And so that would be something we could look at of putting the left turn actually what we call a positive offset. So this car is no longer blocking this car's view to see the oncoming traffic.
What's those green lines?
The green line is just the existing curb line. I'm not sure why they showed up green, but yeah.
Good.
So with that in mind, avoiding the left turns, we have this median that actually goes in the middle of the road, so it does limit some vehicle movement. Under this, you could no longer go straight through the intersection because there's now a median there.
Yes.
You could no longer turn left out of the intersection. Now, you can still turn right, and you can still turn right, but we've routed the pedestrian crosswalk within this median, so the only traffic that a pedestrian would have to look at and be in conflict with is the traffic going straight through the intersection. They're no longer worried about a left turner. They're in either direction, this way or this way. And that was one of the big concerns we had with the crosswalk that was there before, is that the crossing guards ended up actually having to close this left turn lane every day during school crossing time. And so this eliminates that left turn movement, gets them over here, and they cross here. So again, when they're at this point, all the pedestrian has to do is look if cars are coming this way. We still would have those RFP systems, but now they would be independently working based on the direction of the road.
I don't know that I would love that still as a school crossing, having a bunch of kids.
Right, and
I don't know, this is school crossing, this is just if you were
But I
trying
think
to improve
traffic, yeah.
pedestrian and eliminate the left, the more dangerous that all the way across that intersection. It is a wide road.
Mhm.
And the few accidents that we have had tend to be people coming out of those side streets trying to go across those intersections, all the way across.
Do we, that last major crash probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago, it was at the top end,
Yeah.
right, coming out of the school going left? With
Yes.
Correct,
Okay, so-
coming this way.
Yeah, okay.
And the
Same
car in the
issue,
number
just
one,
cutting
yeah.
across the road, it's a nightmare.
Well, early in the morning, it's late in the fall time, the sun, it's just not it's a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Really, it's
Well,
not that much different
They were the
than
furthest
what we're
north.
Then right there,
Well,
exactly,
and
yeah.
the simple fact of the matter is, the more and more we
Chief,
build
the
out
number
here,
one furthest
the
north?
busier and busier that's gonna get,
The
it's
number
not
one
gonna
lane
get
is
any
the
better
Number one
at
lane's
all times of the
to
day.
this inside, so that you count number one lane from the median out.
Okay.
So
They were going-
in this case, there's two
Right.
lanes,
Is
number
this-
one's your
Yes.
first lane, second.
They were
That's
westbound.
right there, where you had the light just a second ago,
On
coming
the-
out of the school, right
yeah.
there.
This one.
Why would we continue to allow left turns out of there to come out onto the street if we're blocking the rest? I mean, if that, philosophically,
Yeah,
if
no,
that's what we're trying to accomplish, it would seem like extending that median down a little further and blocking turns coming out of that would
That seemed
be
really.
more conducive to
Yeah.
at least thematically what you're doing here.
Yeah, I would say there are a couple differences, right? You don't have a second leg tying into this intersection like we do here. So this is not just limiting the left turn, it's eliminating the straight through movement,
Correct,
which,
right.
as Nathan said, is also a concern with how wide it is and how short of gaps you have in that. I mean, it's worth looking at. The other thing is we don't actually have a crosswalk here, so although vehicles, that movement may not be the easiest to make, you have a few more risks and things to look at turning left out of
It's
there.
just right on it.
It's a little bit of a simpler movement. Now, I'm not saying it's an easy movement or the best movement, but it is a little bit different in the intersection that we were looking at over here.
The curves are not great on that road.
Yeah, when I do drop off and pick up, it's the left out of this bus parking or the drop off zone, they left. But that backs up all the time, and it would help out with drop off if we could reconfigure that road in
So
two lanes.
people aren't trying to turn left
Yeah,
across
no
all the
left,
traffic.
right hand turn out, but you push it to the north and make a left, coming back all the way looping around would be more ideal, but that's something I wanted to bring to traffic committee in the future, to restripe that or readjust that road, so on that in lane, you don't have a bunch of backup on Herriman Main Street trying to turn right in, because everybody's dumping right into that bus lane, or going around to the next drop off. It's kind of a weird hokey drop off,
Okay.
but again, it's only 35
So this is down
minutes.
the road no matter what, right?
Yeah,
This is
so this
correct.
is a proposal for us to put it into our CIP, not necessarily program it to a year, but to put it in the CIP where every year, the plan is to look at projects and see if they can compete and whether they should be budgeted into a fiscal year budget. And so this would put the project as a future project, but it wouldn't give it funding yet or fund it, I guess, essentially. And that was our recommendation. There are a few things we can do within our existing budget, our traffic committee budget, and that is put in some driver feedback signs. So they were part of the school zone that was there before, and we heard a lot of people saying, hey, we missed that. The fact that it would flag you if you were going over the speed limit. Now, Sherry's right on those, that they only are effective for so long. So we'd incorporate them into our overall rotation schedule for the city, where we're rotating them around the city to refresh that
Feeling of the trailers and the
effect. So they might be there for a year or two, and then they'll move to somewhere else in the city. Then we'll bring them back, so they're continually kind of being effective. So that's a recommendation as well.
Do these new signs not tell you that you're going 75, so that you don't try to hit that target? They just, after
Yeah.
45, they just flash?
Yeah,
Okay.
typically you can set a max speed, so you're not getting those people
That's
trying to race and
I
see
mean,
their
I
speed.
never did that.
Check my speed odometer.
But yes, you can set those. So that's our recommendation, some crosswalk enhancements as far as striping goes and lighting goes, just making sure that it's lit up well with the RFP systems. There's some simple light attachments, so for during the night, that when you press the button, the lights come on the bars, but also a light at the top shines down at the crosswalk. So they're not actually in the dark in the crosswalk, so you can see that. So that's another inexpensive thing that we could probably handle more immediate than this long-term project to help with
We talked about that one also for the crossing down by the dog park.
dog park as well. So
Yeah.
we're looking
That
at these
one's-
corridor wide, right, from
that
the
makes
dog park
sense.
down. So those are some immediate things that we propose. Yes, let's get on those. And then this is kind of our long-term, if we can find the funding and it fits into our funding schedule, that maybe this might be a project in the future.
And I would say this one would need some more conversation, because this neighborhood who's pushing for this, they would lose their left out.
Right.
I think over time, as we've talked about, this road becomes much busier. It probably just has to happen
Agree.
where we lose that left, but it would be more conversation. So our recommendation right now is just do those small things and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Can we get, you'll pull a report on budget numbers and costs associated? or-
Yeah, so here's just a quick, and Don, it's not advancing at all. I don't know if
There it
this.
goes.
Oh, okay. So these are the other options that didn't pop up, that we looked at the intersection. A roundabout, which was talked a lot about in one of the meetings. It would require wiping out a home and possibly a business. And so the cost and feasibility of that, as we looked at it, just didn't make sense, but we laid it out and just wanted to make sure, because we heard that was an option.
An option, yeah.
Another option is just to have a full median go all the way through that intersection at Herriman Row, so no left turns at all in. And then we
And
looked at,
Did option two have a crosswalk or no?
yes, it would have had a crosswalk, yeah.
Yeah, it had the pedestrian.
And then limited lefts is similar to what we were doing, but it wouldn't provide any center median for pedestrians, so you're still not really eliminate many of the issues, because they're still crossing through the left turns. And then option 4 is the picture we talked about. So, yeah, here's the cost estimates for long-term projects. In the staff report, there were also numbers for the immediate improvements.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I can answer any questions there, but that's kind of our recommendation.
What would be the cost to run a sidewalk? Do sidewalk between where it's that gravel
On the
path.
corner here where the asphalt and gravel is?
So
You're
not
talking
on
about the
Main
side that's
Street.
You're
not
talking about
finished?
Main Street?
No, on Black Locust.
Yeah, cause Main Street has an asphalt path there.
It's
Um,
not,
So does Black.
well, yeah, it's, yeah,
And so you're talking about maybe on the other side of the U Road from the city hall.
yeah.
That's where the
Yeah,
gravel.
where kids are
the-
riding their bikes
having
on the
issues with
gravel and
bikes
stuff
and-
like
yeah.
that, just, you know, even if it's a asphalt path or something that
Yeah,
just
yeah,
is-
we could look, asphalt path will be a little bit more economical and kind of give the idea of it's more temporary. When a commercial pad came in, we could require it to be replaced with sidewalk. So like for a stretch all the way that we're talking about, it would probably be in the, I would say $15,000 range. But that's just a rough kind of thought, it could be up and down from that a little bit.
So expensive.
Well, I'm guessing head nods on just start with the basic stuff. It's in your budget, right? And it's,
Yeah, I think,
we're leaning on you, cause this is your,
I think any evidence of any improvement would go a long ways. It's not gonna make them happy, right? And they're not gonna go away, which is fine, because we wanna still have conversations and figure out a better solution and get the idea of the issue, what they actually are. And once we get down to the meetings, maybe a couple more meetings through the future, I know that they talked about a community meeting that you and I were gonna have, or a community, what do they call it?
Town hall.
No, it was like, it was just a small group, a work group. They thought that we were, I don't know if that was, a work group was stated or said, but I knew, or like a task force thing, I don't know what that looks like, or who or what we do on that, or even if that was what we planned on. So, and I don't think that was the intention of what we looked at or planned on. But we assigned us to meet with the community, and I think that's where some confusion came in. Maybe we need to meet with the community and go through that process. I know that they were harping really hard about getting it in for this new school safe walk route, and I said, government doesn't look like this. Your 2025, 26 year will still be this safe walk route, because that's the safe walk route. And so, and again, I think it's the safest route. Even if we do make all these changes, it's gonna be years down the road for budget and for capital improvements, so,
And again, I don't think it changes the walk route.
agreed.
Yeah, all this stuff is for
Man,
vehicular
yeah,
safety.
that's,
It makes it safer to walk the civic stuff, but when we're in charge of crossing kids, I mean, she said it the best, we're gonna do the safest
It-
possible.
it's ironic that walkability, safety for kids, safety for everybody, speed limits, traffic flow, like each solution impacts each one of those differently, right?
Correct.
And so you might be able to make a crosswalk safer for kids if you put in a, refuge in the middle of the road or something, right? But how does that impact traffic flow, right? If you put in pop-outs on corners, you shorten the distance that people have to turn, but now you have cars coming into closer proximity where, you step out, there's an accident, not you step out and you got a little cushion, right? I just think there are limited understanding of the unintended consequences of some of these things. Does that make sense? And then
Even on our end though, too,
yeah,
right?
it's the same thing,
Yeah.
right? And then overreaching all of that is the cost associated with all of these things, right? Now, look, if $300,000 is gonna keep kids way safer, okay, we need to get that done and put it on the list and let's make it happen.
For sure.
If it's a convenience factor, whew, there's a lot of things that need 300 grand in this city, right? So, without speaking in any opposition to any of this, I want to support what I think is going to accomplish the most desired outcomes with the least amount of bad consequences, if that makes sense. And maybe that's something you do in a work group, maybe that is something a little more intimate discussion, right? But the people that aren't in the work group are gonna be mad that other people made the decision for them, right?
Yeah, cause
So,
there's, how many people were in that last meeting?
About 15.
Yeah,
15, even if there's 20, you say,
5 of those people have, every group of tables have different opinions, as you can see on the, and
Yeah.
different priorities and different wants and needs, and
Yeah.
so,
I mean, we've heard about the roundabouts, it's not, I mean, we're taking out houses and buildings and spending $5 million for what?
I still wouldn't walk kids there, roundabout.
Yeah, exactly, that's even less safe for kids right now.
Great
Still not
for-
safe.
Now you're getting crazier, yeah, I mean,
I don't wanna watch.
but every metric has a slide of 100% safe, and none of them can get past that mark or close to that mark all sequentially.
yeah.
Yeah,
Did you never do, there's never 100%
No,
safe
sure,
solution,
yeah.
unless I guess you lock yourself and stay home and not have to commute anywhere. You're not probably gonna get in an accident or run over. There's other things that you probably have issues with.
Yeah, I think you'd probably be 100% safe in the TRV, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think you could probably win against
there's an
anything in
IED.
that, yeah.
no, but you have to eat, and you have to use the facilities,
Yeah, tough
Nothing's safe.
yeah, nothing's.
Okay, well, let's
But this
move on,
did
let's
balance
keep us
out.
going here. One thing, I just got a text while we were visiting, keep an eye on, there is legislation this year looking at keeping daylight savings. So we may have more people walking in the dark though, so we may, I don't know how much these lights are, but we may wanna,
Yeah, look at that
Some-
citywide.
anyways, keep on our, I think we just keep that on our
But
radar,
that's
who's
the
on the
key.
traffic
That's a
committee.
good one.
What
Because
you
it's
just
not just
said.
here,
It's
it's all,
about
we're gonna have
citywide.
crossing
That's
all
the
over
problem
the
with
city.
That's what I'm saying,
Making
it's
changes
just-
on just this, there are so many other places that you could
Well,
shine a light on that are not.
Right, and
Change
similar
the-
to what was asked,
change
why
the
do
time
it
to school
here
start.
but not over here?
That's aspect of
That's a
discussion.
heck of a lot better than
It's a big city,
installing
a lot of problems.
new
Yeah,
lights at every
our school
crosswalk.
systems aren't,
And again, like I said, it will
Educational,
affect stuff, it
we're
would be a year
daycare.
dark crossing. Okay, let's move on, let's do, you got what you need on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's do 2.2, city status report, Trevor, anything you wanna add, anything you wanna? You got a little presentation?
Happy to field questions if there are any.
I do actually have one, Trevor. It's your last sentence on page 5.
Okay, so we had the status report and his white paper, so it's probably the white paper.
Yes, your white paper. Explain to me your last sentence.
Could you read it to me, please?
The city thus has the opportunity to consider an alternative funding mix that is less dependent on sales tax revenues in the future.
It's a word salad to say there are possible other funding mechanisms that I may not even be aware of at this moment that we could consider if we wanted to.
I would love to hash that out a little bit at some point, because what are our other opportunities to consider? Because we're just hung on economic development because we gotta have sales tax revenue. I mean, we have some franchise taxes and stuff like that, but what are those
So
opportunities?
there's like the transportation utility fee the state is talking about. I mean, there are things like that, so, understand that all of those are exactions out of your citizens.
Yeah.
And so it's just trying to, I think, represent that if you are 100% sales tax, that's a risky, that one's a much more volatile tax. And so you do need a mix. So as we look at the funding mix, that may be part of that discussion, is how far down a path you go on only one funding source and still feel comfortable that it's going to be secure.
Diversify your income.
For sure,
Yeah,
I
but-
love
and
diversify, but how are we, when I was first elected, Figgy, right? He came in and talked to us about divergent thinking, okay? And so how much divergent thinking are we really doing in considering how we pay for everything that we have to pay for, right? Parks, it's like we were talking last night, it's like, yeah, so even if you put in your 35-acre park, guess what? You might not get it for 15 years from now, and your kids might be all grown by now, by then, right? So, and I'm not suggesting we're not doing that, I'm just saying, how can we look more into that? Cause I loved that statement, it's like, what are we doing to, because we're zeroed in on a lot of things, gotta get that economic development, which is true based on what we're looking at right now, but how can we, is there other avenues?
So, the state's pushed this in Zion's Bank out, your land, your plan, how do you have city assets generate revenues that are not tax related? Whether it's not even user fees, do you collect rents for things that you're letting? It's probably a conversation we could have, especially as we have these pads out here. Are there ways to have assets you have generate something to offset? I don't think there is a silver bullet for funding local government anywhere in the country. Nobody has this magic formula that says if you do it this way, it'll work. It's usually the grass is greener someplace else, that they have it better than us. I think this is an opportunity, we could have a conversation. Again, my concern is when you get too far down one path, and right now sales tax is our major thing, and it probably always will be. But if it became 100%, it's also the most impacted by economic forces.
Yeah, and I guess that would be the thing is, what sources of revenue does a city have other than taxes and fees? None. So
Right now, we
by
don't.
mix, you're just saying taxing different things in different amounts. Right, I mean, instead of sales tax, we need to increase property tax. Instead of property tax, we need to increase licensing fees. Instead of,
Yeah, I think.
and I guess that's what I'm trying to figure
out.
out is what's suggested is a mix of the taxing mechanisms we're using, spreading them out more, or
Well, it's
allocating
just,
them
it's
differently?
that making sure we keep that in mind as a conversation. So this was really focused on, start out on sales tax, but looking at how is growth impacting the sales tax growth, because a lot of it is the population. We're adding about the same number of houses every year, which means our population as a percent is slowing, right? Because the same, you add 1,500 people, when you're at 40,000, that's a different percentage than when you're at 65. And so just talking about, we can't get fixated that, hey, sales tax is always going to grow. What should we do?
We need to, again, and I've said this before, we need to focus more on the different parts of sales tax, right? So the part that we can influence that will make a difference is the half of it that originates here or stays here, right? The population part, yep, you're adding people and our sales tax is growing, but our proportion of the local is not growing.
But people have to keep in mind, right?
It stayed constant, so that, well, if we're talking about how to increase a revenue or another, that is the only thing that we can try to do things to increase its portion, right, relative to the other. So if we wanna increase property tax, we increase property tax. We wanna increase revenue from fees, we increase fees, right? Sales tax is the two components, the population component, you can add more people, right? Those people demand more services, or you can try to increase the location part of it, right?
But
I
just
mean, that's been that's why there's the focus.
absolutely, and I'm not necessarily saying we don't need that, but at the same time, I mean, this $26 million number that got thrown around, right? And that's $130,000 of taxes a year. That's how much city. That's not even half of this.
That's why I sent that message.
We're gonna build a 60-acre thing to bring in half of a sidewalk? Like, people gotta keep in mind, all the retail in the world is only producing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue to the city. Not this, millions and millions of dollars of windfall kind of thing, right? That's absurd.
So our next one, we're gonna tackle property tax, just to show you what it's doing in a little bit. So eventually we can have a conversation. I do think, even if you did your land, your plan, you got rents from other things, we're talking very small percentages of a budget versus these. And I will point out, this was an interesting, our direct sales tax has doubled. The amount we have collected has doubled since 2020. Right, we went from 1.6 million to 3.2 million. Our population number in that same time frame went from 5.2 to 9, so it didn't double, but it's those things that we're not seeing this in the one chart. You see that ramp and then it starts to flatten. That's what we're seeing.
John, can
Is
you
a flat.
scroll up just a little bit?
I have a weird question too then, I guess, is
Next one up.
how does a person in our city equate to a business on like
how many people equal one business? Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's like,
So,
it's like
How many square footage of retail space do you need to equal
to
just the
equal this
population?
many
Yeah.
people.
so
You know what I mean? Those-
we did a little bit of that analysis trying to, when we're doing those like
The demographic things.
looking at, what the land use calculation, when you do this change, what does that happen? We've tried to come up with a number that shows this is about what people are spending. Now, we have leakage, they leave the communities, what we capture. It's kind of an interesting thought. I don't know that our numbers are 100%. We've tried to make some projections. I will say the difference between a $1 million house and a $1 million retail building in property tax is on that $1 million house, it's only 55.
Right, 'cause
I only
you
get
get
55% of it on a commercial building, we get 100%. So
Right.
that's
But
one of
that's
the things
property
we need
taxes.
on
I'm just
property
curious about the
tax.
sales tax component because
So
we're getting
here's the other
some
thing.
from population and we're getting some from
Yeah,
sales.
we came up with a number that based off past, so I mean, we could share that.
So here's the other thing on that part of it, right? So if you want to say what's the difference between, and we've had these series of conversations for a long time. Well, if you add people, yep, you get your portion of the state sales tax for people, but you also have to provide all the services to them.
Right.
That's why I wonder what the offset is.
So there, I mean, there is a net positive to.
It's a really
increasing
interesting
dollars,
Calculation, like,
right?
it's a really interesting calculation to do, right?
If you can
Yeah.
get people who don't live here to spend money here and that stays here,
There
don't
you
pay
go.
for our
But
people,
there are,
that's what
but there
moves
are
the needle.
some costs to service for businesses and commercial too. You still have issues where police have to go and things like
Again,
that.
the ecosystem I talked about, right? So
So I
if you
just
have
would be
a
interested
bank
to
that
know.
pays property tax and pays for them, and hopefully don't have too many bank robberies, then we don't have.
Just credit union
Right,
robberies,
they're paying for, they're paying for that and not taking up the service, right? We have to have some of everything. It's, yeah, what is the best mix and what can we do to get the optimal mix?
That's my question is, do we really have an understanding of what that is? Like the population versus the commercial, cause we get zeroed in on our little tunnels, right? We gotta get this, and it's like, what is the best mix for that? What is the best solution for that? Anyway,
I think it's worth a conversation.
I don't know that you have to spend, the
10
next
chicken restaurants. People
100 hours.
And there's probably a historical analysis of that, right? A regression analysis. There's a kind of what the current status of that is. And then there's some reasonable projections you can make on where that might move. And none of that's exact, right? I mean, we're gonna guess, but
Yeah.
it would still be an interesting conversation to see where those trends are and how that calculates as, revenue per capita versus expense per capita, right? Revenue per square foot of retail versus, increased expense and traffic flow and all that other stuff, right? And
Yeah.
What is there certain kinds of revenue
That's right.
that would be more beneficial to us than others?
Yeah.
A different mix would create more rev, but less
Sure.
expense, that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, our economic development, it might drive some of that too, to say, hey, really, let's target this more. We think we know this is that, like hotels or something like that, but it's like, this is why we're targeting it. It's more focused rather than just bring it here.
And I think that those metrics from other cities might be historic, and we might have that data, but ours is a little bit different, being on the southwest corner in the cul-de-sac and not having the flow through traffic, and that's where we need these amenities of the destination of the play.
The attractions,
Yeah, the
right.
attractions, yeah, and so, and the type of business that comes with that resource, right? An REI might do great out here, might not,
This was supposed to be a really fast agenda item, sorry I made it more complicated, but I read that and I was like,
Good
are we
question.
really looking at diversifying our portfolio, or are we just, because it's the only revenue we really have, and you're probably right, there's no silver bullet, but even if it's smaller chunks of revenue, it's revenue. And as long as it doesn't cost us more than we make, then let's look at,
on-street
it
parking,
makes-
charge for that.
There you go.
Teddy said it, everybody, just in case you wonder.
Meters.
They're all electronic.
Yeah.
So probably about once a quarter, we'll give you one of these, just kind of here's some other information, and eventually we'll bring them all together and talk.
I think having some of the stuff that Sherry's talking about for ICSC, of being able to target and say, we really want to attract you, that type of business or that type of group to our area.
Okay. I'm looking at our agenda, what can we do, are there any items we can do in 13 minutes?
No, other than you can start the RFP, we might be able to do that. It kind of is up to you.
Let's start it, let's start, let's just.
It's like AI or something.
Go to 2.3, solid waste RFP discussion. We'll go to about 5.2 and then if we need to come back, we will at this point. So go fast.
I'll just tee this up. Essentially, we're here to answer at least one, maybe two questions. The first being, does the city council want to pursue an exit from Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling? Is it district? I don't know. I wrote the thing, I don't know. So we can start there.
So much funnier than you.
And go to number.
I think the answer is, I don't think we even know, because we don't know if we wanna exit it, because we don't know what the cost would be associated with it, that, hence the need for the RFP. That would be my answer.
It's kind of almost circular because the work to get out is a little bit unknown as well.
Do we want, instead of pursue, explore,
I can change it, sure.
right? That's really the question right now. Do we want to
Yeah.
explore and exit from it? What are our options? What are the costs, et cetera?
No, I didn't.
My answer to that is yes.
Yes, we wanna explore it, for sure.
You have more slides.
I do.
Okay.
They sort of jumped the gun to option two, but in thinking through as staff, we kinda came together to wrangle with this, because as Nathan said, it is sort of circular. We wanna explore, well, let's explore, so we can see if we wanna explore. And came to essentially 4 issues that it would be helpful to have council feedback on, so that we can craft the RFP potentially, in order to write it up. So the first is to consider the mix of waste removal services. Currently, we kinda get, the Rolls Royce of solid waste services, we get everything. Whereas we could take the Corolla, we could do something stripped down, still gets us there in terms of, trash, recycling, maybe green, and that's it. So that's something that, we'd like to get your feedback on. The next is just the operational plan. Right now, Wolford kinda handles everything end to end, whereas other servicers may or may not. We, as staff, we are unaware of anyone in Utah that's doing billing. So the billing piece would come to us, that would be obviously on customer service and utility billing. If can management came to the city, then that would be public works that would have to play a role in that. To say nothing of owning the cans, another
Storage nightmare.
unknown.
It's kind of a mix.
The third issue here, I guess I'm moving quick to tee it up, maybe food for thought for later. The third one here is just to who are we serving? Right now, Wolford is serving residences on public roads as well as city-owned facilities. Do we want to, in an RFP, explore expanding that service? Or how do we want to handle groups like HOAs, construction, commercial, this sort of thing? And then finally, landfill membership. Now, right now, Wolford nor we are members of Transjordan. There's no real clear path to that membership from the city side. There are alternative landfills that are being used by other municipalities. Really, the upshot of all this is there are tipping fees associated with any waste removal operation or any solid waste operation. And so looking at a service provider and asking what are you a member of and what those tipping fees would be, and kind of being able to weigh those back and forth among different providers. Also thinking about if we, as the city, wanna join, there's a lot there to unpack, but essentially, yeah, those are the, kind of the four areas that we were, stuck on, I guess, in considering how to move forward. Nathan, would you mind talking through kinda the idea of like, we're not going out for RFP, but we are kinda maybe making Wolford kind of go
So-
out for RFP to look at reducing their operational costs, which I think is really the impetus for this whole discussion, where we don't necessarily as a city go out and try to explore an exit from the body, but we ask the body as, you know, one of the largest pieces of it to look at what they might possibly do to lower their costs that then translate to cost savings for the residents.
That's one of the things we've had is, they don't have to provide the service, they could contract out. One of our challenges with this whole setup is that it's painfully obvious right now that the larger municipalities in Woodford are the ones subsidizing everybody else. It's just like UPD, all those other groups that we were in when we were in large unincorporated area. Now that we're a city, so we could do that, short of exiting, say, you go out and see if there's a cheaper way to do it instead of having staff. I don't know that they would do that. So if we went back, so that is an alternative, you could throw that bomb out there and see how they react. I think if we go back to the first piece, the first question is kind of simple. Do you want us to bid the services they do or just basic trash services?
I'd like to see,
Yes.
I'd like to see an RFP that would include them all, but it would also allow us to pick and
A
choose,
menu?
right?
Okay.
A menu, here's what it would cost us for this, and we determine whether or not,
Compare apples to
yeah, we
apples.
can survey our residents or whatever, and we can say,
What do we get
these
for
are
what we're
essentials.
paying now?
Yeah,
Well, you get a lot of stuff that most of our people don't use,
Yeah.
when we looked at it.
Yep.
There's just not many. Okay, so I think that would answer our first question. I think in the RFP, my recommendation is make them do the cans, let them
Oh,
be
yeah.
their cans.
Agreed.
In other states, I've made them be the billing, but if they require us to be the billing, that's okay.
so we
We
just
would
do
just
it on
have
a
to-
utility bill.
we'd have to do we would have to
Express bill.
take whatever their fee is and add something to cover the city's costs.
Processing.
And that would be the same with so cans, we would write this RFP, the cans are theirs, we would do the billing if they won't do it, okay?
I don't think-
And then,
But I think, again, a menu, if it's an option, how much does it cost for you to bill versus us? And if it's not an option, it's not an
I
option.
said Waste Management bills in every other state but Utah, because I think they've discovered that it's cheaper to let somebody else do it.
Plus, it's no risk on them, they provide the service and the risk is on the city.
So if I were in their shoes, I'd do the same thing, which is why I would rather they do it, because if we're in their shoes, I'd rather they do it. This one, I think what we could say, I don't know that we can mandate that any. We talked about,
That's
can
up
you
to them.
force it? So we could just say, here it is, we wouldn't restrict them as a private provider from going to HOAs, they could work with the HOAs themselves. We
Yeah.
wouldn't, Warford has some issues because they're public, but ACE, Republic, Waste Management, I'm probably forgetting somebody else, they could do that, cause they could enter into an agreement with, they probably already are with those private HOAs, so it wouldn't be a big issue.
And or
We
can
have
we-
some in our community.
So can we have it to where the HOA can opt in to just not do it, not have an agreement, and they just go with the city? Because a lot of the HOAs don't wanna have to deal with it, but they have
Yeah.
to because we'll
Yeah, I think
cover
in
it.
this, we would just say it's available, and
Yeah.
if you want to do this, you could just do it, they could bill their residents separately, they wouldn't need the joint thing.
Some of their streets are not applicable to large garbage trucks.
Well,
So-
that's why Whitford doesn't go into a
Yep.
lot of them,
Yeah.
but they're servicing them anyway. And if you've got this contract and you're already servicing all those, it makes sense for them just to be part of
of the city.
So we had put it out there just in the RFP. And so the last one, to me, this is, we put in there, you tell us how you're gonna do it. I don't, so in talking with Cottonwood Heights, they were trying to figure out how they might get into Transjordan. So some of the Transjordan cities said maybe they'd let you in, for a
For fee.
fee.
They're not gonna be
Sure.
around, they're gonna be a transfer station in the future.
Well, but they're landfills, so this goes to their landfill down in Utah County. And they pay significantly less because they have the investment to purchase
Significantly
it.
less.
But again, I think for the my recommendation, but we just want council to say, yeah, we're good with that, is that we put it in there, we're not a member, you tell us where you're gonna service, what those fees would be.
Yeah, and there's a calculation of, is a lower
Yeah.
dump cost gonna count, how many dumps do you have to make
Well, and
to cover an upfront fee, right?
so one of the things we've discovered in other cities, those tipping fees may be billed directly to the city and not, so those then get, of course, passed on to the user in the bill, but it's trying to understand that makeup, cause am I saying that's how
Right,
Blvd's
that's
doing
the
it?
standard is, the city pays the tipping fees, not the provider.
And so then you take those tipping fees and redistribute those to your users.
Yeah.
But that's,
So it's not part of their initial fee, they charge a fee for service,
Transport
and then in
service, yeah.
addition, you pay tipping fees.
so then we would have to calculate that all together to give you the apples.
Yeah.
To apples.
Perfect, okay.
I-
So is that clear? I agree,
Yeah,
I don't know if
It should say exiting is, they have to let us out.
yeah, for sure.
If they choose not to let us out, I do think when it was formed, we were a small city, and it made sense. We're a large enough city, I don't know that we should still be handcuffed to that, and I would suggest if for some reason they don't let us out, that we seek a legislative means to get out.
I can tell you that the sentiment of the people
I
I've
remember
spoken
doing
with on the
something similar
board,
to that.
and this is absolutely not, it been voted on or discussed in that manner, so I don't want to, mislead, but, the sentiment wasn't that they don't want a member that feels like they're handcuffed to them and they have to stay.
I think early on it probably helped them with their cash flow and their guarantees, right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trevor, thank you, everybody, okay. look
I'll
for
make a motion to temporarily recess board meeting and go into general.
Start second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I don't doubt it.